There are some names that seem to carry more than one history. They begin as descriptions, then become family stories, then turn into legends, and after enough generations, no one is completely sure where the truth ends and the myth begins. The phrase Black Irish is one of those names. In many Irish-American families, it has been used to describe people of Irish descent with dark hair, dark eyes, or a darker complexion than the familiar stereotype of pale skin and red hair. In modern Ireland, the phrase can also carry a different meaning, referring to black people who are Irish. So from the beginning, this is not a simple label. There is no official ethnic group called the Black Irish. There is no census category and no proven bloodline explaining everyone who has carried the name. Instead, the phrase has survived because it is flexible. It can describe appearance. It can suggest a legend. It can mark a difference inside Irish identity itself. And that raises a strange question. How can one phrase describe a face, a family rumor, a migration story, and a struggle for belonging all at the same time? To understand the Black Irish, we have to begin not with certainty, but with a legend. A story told along the edge of the Atlantic, where Ireland faces the open sea, and where one of the most famous fleets in European history came to a violent end. The year was 1588. Spain was one of the great powers of Europe. Its king, Philip II, sent a massive naval force toward England, hoping to support an invasion and shift the religious and political future of the island. This force became known as the Spanish Armada. The fleet included about 130 ships, carrying sailors, soldiers, guns, and supplies. But the campaign quickly turned into disaster. After fighting the English fleet, and after the Battle of Gravelines, the Armada failed to gain control of the Channel. Unable to safely link with the invasion army, the fleet was forced to retreat. But it could not simply sail back the way it came. The Armada tried to return to Spain by sailing north around Scotland and then down past Ireland into the Atlantic. It was a dangerous route, especially for damaged ships with exhausted crews. Then, the storms came. Driven by fierce winds, many Spanish ships were pushed toward cliffs, reefs, and exposed beaches. Along roughly 500 kilometers of coastline, from Antrim in the north to Kerry in the southwest, ships broke apart in the surf. Estimates vary, but accounts commonly describe up to 24 Armada ships wrecked in or near Ireland, with roughly 6,000 men lost in Irish waters or on Irish shores. This is where the most famous Black Irish legend begins. According to the story, some Spanish survivors escaped death, found shelter, married Irish women, and left descendants with dark hair, dark eyes, and Mediterranean features. Over time, those descendants were remembered as the Black Irish. It is easy to understand why this story lasted. It has everything a legend needs: a doomed fleet, a stormy coast, foreign sailors, secret survival, and children born between two worlds. It turns appearance into adventure. It gives a family trait the drama of history. And for many people, it offers a simple explanation for why some Irish families look different from the image outsiders often imagine. But legends can survive for reasons other than proof. And in this case, the evidence is far more complicated than the story suggests. Many of the Spanish sailors who reached Ireland did not settle quietly into village life. Some drowned before they ever touched land. Some were killed by English forces or local authorities. Some were captured. Others fled north into Scotland or found ways to return to Europe. The wrecks were real. The deaths were real. A small number of survivors certainly moved through Ireland, but the idea that they created an entire recognizable population is much harder to prove. This does not mean every family story is false. It means the famous Armada explanation is probably too small for the size of the legend built around it. And that is where the mystery deepens. Because long before the Armada, Ireland was never as isolated as the story makes it seem. It was an island, but it was not a sealed world. For thousands of years, people moved across the seas around it. Traders, monks, soldiers, fishermen, settlers, and raiders crossed between Ireland, Britain, Iberia, and the wider Atlantic world. The western coast of Ireland did not face emptiness. It faced routes, waterways, weather systems, fishing grounds, pilgrimage paths, trade links, stories. So if darker features appeared in Irish families, they did not need one single dramatic origin. They could have come from many layers of ancestry, shaped by ancient migration and later contact. They could also have come from ordinary variation within Irish populations themselves. But at this point, the real question changes. Maybe the mystery is not only where the Black Irish came from. Maybe the deeper mystery is why people first named them at all. Because the phrase Black Irish was never only about where someone's ancestors came from. It was about how they were seen. In many Irish-American families, the term was used for people of Irish descent who seemed to stand apart from the image others expected. They had black or dark brown hair. They had brown or hazel eyes. Sometimes their skin was described as darker or more olive-toned. These features did not need a foreign origin. Dark hair and dark eyes have always existed among Irish people. But because popular images of Irishness often focused on red hair, pale skin, and light eyes, some families looked for a story that made their difference feel meaningful. So families created one. A dark-haired grandfather became proof of Spanish sailors. A brown-eyed child became evidence of some older hidden line. A look became a clue. And once that clue was passed from parent to child, it became something stronger than a description. It became identity. This is how family folklore often works. It takes something visible, something ordinary, and connects it to a larger story. The story may not be fully provable, but it gives shape to memory. It tells a family that they came from somewhere, that their difference has a reason, and that their appearance is part of a history larger than themselves. And if a family carries a story for generations, does it matter whether that story began as fact, memory, or myth? That question matters, because the Black Irish story did not survive in a peaceful world. It survived in a history shaped by poverty, exile, and loss. By the middle of the 1800s, Ireland was facing one of the worst disasters in modern European history. In 1845, a disease called potato blight began destroying the crop that millions of Irish people depended on for survival. The potato was not just one food among many. For poor tenant families, especially in the west and south of Ireland, it was the center of daily life. Nearly half of Ireland's population relied almost entirely on potatoes for their diet, while many others ate them often. When the crop failed, hunger spread. The disaster became known as the Great Famine, or in Irish memory, the Great Hunger. Its numbers are almost hard to absorb. Ireland's population was almost 8.4 million in 1844. By 1851, it had fallen to about 6.6 million. About 1 million people died from starvation and disease. Perhaps 2 million more eventually emigrated, leaving behind villages, farms, and family graves that many would never see again. The famine did not create the phrase Black Irish, but it changed the world in which Irish identity traveled. Families carried names, accents, prayers, songs, and stories across the Atlantic. Some left from ports like Cork, Liverpool, and Galway. Many crossed in crowded ships where disease spread easily and death was common. Some of the worst of these vessels became known as coffin ships, a name later used for ships that seemed to carry people toward death as much as toward a new life. Between 1841 and 1850, Irish immigrants made up about 49% of all immigrants to the United States. In some American cities, Irish neighborhoods grew rapidly, filled with people who had survived hunger only to face a different kind of struggle. They arrived poor. Many were Catholic. Many spoke with accents that marked them immediately as outsiders. They entered a country that needed their labor, but often rejected their presence. And in that world, identity became both a burden and a shield. If stories like this help you see history in a deeper way, take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps this kind of documentary research reach more people. And now, the story moves from Ireland itself to the places where Irish families tried to begin again. For many Irish immigrants, America did not begin as a promise. It began as a test. They crowded into cities like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and Chicago. They worked on docks, in homes, in factories, on canals, on railroads, and in jobs that were dangerous, dirty, or badly paid. In the public imagination, they were often treated not as future Americans, but as a problem. Anti-Irish prejudice was tied closely to anti-Catholic fear. Many native-born Protestants believed Catholic immigrants would remain loyal to the Pope rather than to the United States. Anti-immigrant and anti-Catholic feeling grew during the 1840s, and in the 1850s, the Know Nothing movement, also known as the American Party, turned that fear into a national political force. So Irish families lived with pressure from both sides. In Ireland, many had been pushed out by hunger, rent, eviction, and limited opportunity. In America, they were often pushed down by class, religion, and prejudice. They were told they did not fully belong in the old country anymore, and did not yet belong in the new one. When a family is treated as foreign in one country and forced to prove itself in another, what stories does it hold on to? It holds on to the stories that explain who they are. That is one reason a phrase like Black Irish could survive. It was not just a theory about ancestry. It was a way of naming difference inside a larger story of displacement. For some families, it pointed to dark features. For others, to Spanish sailors. For others, to a sense of being Irish, but not in the way people expected. And over time, the phrase became less like a single answer and more like a container. Inside it were myths of shipwrecks, memories of famine, signs of appearance, and the need to make a family's past feel meaningful. By the time Irish families had crossed the ocean, buried the dead, found work, and raised children in new cities, the old stories had changed. Some details became sharper, others faded. A grandmother might remember that her people came from the west of Ireland, but not the exact townland. A father might repeat that there was Spanish blood in the family, without knowing when the story began. A child might hear the phrase Black Irish, and understand only that it explained how their family saw itself. This is why the phrase survived. It did not depend on one clear document, one official record, or one proven ancestor. It survived because it held several meanings. For some, it meant dark hair and dark eyes. For others, it meant a possible link to Spain, or to the sailors of 1588. For others, it meant being Irish in a way that did not match the familiar picture. The phrase worked because it was simple. 2 words could carry centuries of migration, appearance, rumor, pride, and pain. But that simplicity can also be misleading, because when people ask where the Black Irish really came from, they are often looking for one clean answer: a lost fleet, a hidden bloodline, a forgotten tribe. History rarely works that way. More often, identity is built slowly, from pieces: a family name, a face in an old photograph, a famine road, a story repeated until it becomes part of the family itself. The Black Irish story is not powerful because every version of it can be proven. It is powerful because so many people used it to explain who they were. And this is where the story becomes larger than ancestry. The Black Irish are often described as if they are a mystery of origin, but in many ways, they are also a mystery of memory. Why do families hold on to certain stories even when the evidence is uncertain? Why does one phrase last for generations while so many names and places disappear? Why do people search the past for a reason their own reflection looks the way it does? The answer may be that identity is never made from facts alone. Facts matter. Dates matter. Records matter. The Spanish Armada did wreck along the Irish coast in 1588. The Great Famine did begin in 1845. Ireland's population did fall by millions through death and emigration. Irish immigrants did face poverty and prejudice in the cities where they tried to begin again. But facts do not travel by themselves. They travel inside stories. A shipwreck becomes an explanation. A famine becomes a wound. A dark-haired ancestor becomes a clue. A family phrase becomes a bridge between what is known and what has been lost. That does not make every legend true, but it does explain why legends survive. For the Black Irish, the most honest answer may be the least simple one. The phrase does not point to one people with one origin. It points to a layered identity shaped by appearance, folklore, migration, hardship, and the need to belong. Some individual Black Irish stories may have roots in real Spanish contact. Others may come from older movements across the Atlantic world. Others may have nothing to do with foreign ancestry at all, and simply reflect the natural variety that has always existed among Irish people. Together, these stories reveal something important. They show how people use the past to make sense of themselves. In the end, the Black Irish may not be the descendants of one lost fleet, one secret colony, or one bloodline. They may be something more complicated and more human. They are a reminder that identity is often built from fragments: a look, a rumor, a family explanation, a disaster survived, a country left behind, a new country that did not always welcome those who arrived. For generations, Irish families carried grief, faith, names, and unfinished stories across the ocean. Some were written in records, others survived in kitchens, at wakes, in old photographs, and in quiet explanations parents gave to children. The phrase Black Irish belongs to that second kind of history. It is not exact enough to be a map. It is not stable enough to be a single origin story. But it has lasted because it gave people a way to speak about difference, survival, and belonging. And perhaps that is the real fascination. The Black Irish are not only a question about where people came from. They are a question about what people remember, what they forget, and what they choose to pass on. Because sometimes, the most lasting histories are not carved into monuments or preserved in official records. Sometimes they survive in a name, and sometimes that name carries an entire world inside it.